Hi and welcome to another edition of the Leadership Untitled Podcast with me, Rob Moores. This is the show that brings together experts from the fields of leadership, L&D, coaching, HR, you name it, to share hints and tips and just have conversations that will hopefully help you navigate that field of leadership that little bit easier. My guest this week is Anastasia Griffith, a UK-based actor who's been in award-winning dramas both in the UK and over in Hollywood. You might recognise her from a show called Once Upon a Time, which is where I first saw her. If you've not seen that one, I'd recommend you go and take a look at it. A Disney-type classic. Now, despite what we might see as living the dream, Anastasia suffered from imposter syndrome, self-sabotaging behaviour, emotional and sexual abuse, usually at the hands of those she thought were there to support her. And after much self-healing, Anastasia, also a single mum, now works as a coach to support actors and parents through the journeys that she's been through, all while crafting her own life around her son. This is a great conversation, really exploring some of the words that we probably use or hear every day, such as imposter syndrome, and really digging into what the reality of that is. So please join me in welcoming Anastasia to the Leadership Untitled Podcast. Hi Anastasia, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Really good, thank you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I always like to start off by just kind of saying, just for my audience, to why it is I've reached out. And some people may be kind of scratching their heads going, I'm sure I recognise her. I've never seen her before. And there's a bunch of things, and like I'll let them go and look up your webpage to see everything that you've been in. But I mean, I first saw you, and we haven't chatted about this just before, actually, Once Upon a Time.
Yeah,
many years ago.
I think that's often the one these days, actually. I think Once Upon a Time was quite a slam dunk internationally. So often it's Princess Abigail that gets.
Yeah, and Catherine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were absolutely, and my wife and I should say, we were absolutely addicted to it. And the weird thing is though, and I don't know whether this resonates with you at all, we've kind of gone through most of it twice, but never actually got to the end. I don't know why.
And also never quite understood it, probably. Like that's what I was. I was like, I actually have no real idea what's going on. And where the hell did Frederick go? Like this guy, my guy, like disappeared. And then we never answered where he went. I mean, I thought later on we'd come back and we'd find each other. And, you know, the whole show just took all sorts of different directions. But I remember reading that pilot and I actually went up for the role of Emma Stone to begin with. And I think I remember walking out of that audition and thinking, I nailed that. And I did nail it. But Jennifer was much better known than I was at the time. And so she booked the role, and she was also amazing, obviously. She is amazing. So they then called me and I was gutted, absolutely gutted. I was like, that was the one I really wanted. And the reason why is it just felt so fresh, so different. You know, it wasn't a sort of freaking law drama or a hospital drama, but it had life and imagination. I loved it. But then they called me and said, would you come in and do this guest arc? And so that was a little consolation prize I had at the end.
It was quite a cool guest arc as well. It was quite cool.
I got to bitch slap Snow White and be in a love triangle with her and Prince Charles.
How many people can say that? I love it. And, you know, I'm probably just because of what I've said before there, I kind of think that kind of period was the best part of it. Those kind of first, I would say, probably 4 to 5 seasons of it, something like that. Really great show. But I'd kind of forgot about that. We'd just been chatting before we started recording about the coaching, and now I've gone immediately a bit more starstruck again. But yeah, it's so the kind of key reason on that then is, so obviously my audience will know what I do. And that brought you up on my Instagram feed, the kind of coaching link. And I'll let you explain a bit more about that in a moment. But there was so much that kind of resonated with me on your posts, albeit it wasn't around leadership coaching.
No.
And I'll just kind of read out just something in there. It says, you know, we are taught, and this is obviously about thinking about acting. We are taught at drama school how to perform, but not how to perform at our best, given the environment we must step into. You just talk about slapping Snow White. That slapped me across the face. I went, I'll just take that drama school out and just put the words leaders development program, something like that.
Yeah, we're taught all these facts, we're taught all these things, but We're not taught how to think in a way that supports us, or to take care of ourselves so that we're ready to step into these roles that are being asked of us.
So it really resonated with me, because it's exactly the same problem. I mean, I've got a background in learning development and then leadership and coaching. It's the same old, bring people in, teach them how to do something, off you pop. You're not prepared, but we kind of make them commit to say that they are.
Yeah. There's a lot of fake it till you make it, isn't there? And I mean, for me, with the actors, what I was referring to in that is there's so much we need to learn. We need to learn how to be a business. That was never taught to us. How are you self-employed person? And we're so creative. That's not natural for us. So there was that element. But it's also, how do we take care of our nervous system? I mean, I think for every human being on this planet, you're being asked to step into a role that is, fake it till you make it, a bit of a stretch for you as a leader in any field. I consider actors who are successful being leaders in their field. They're out there all the time, almost being politicians, but certainly in the work that you do as well, you're being asked to stretch your comfort zone, but yet you're not taught how to take care of the nervous system that is going to be reeling and doing everything it can to keep you in your homeostasis, which is so much stronger than any willpower or conscious decision we can make. So there's that element, but then there's also all of the subconscious beliefs and programs that we hold about ourselves, which again are going to do everything they can to stop you from stretching too far. And so I just feel like there's this tool. I mean, there's a superpower that we can develop, that if you want to step into your power, you want to get better at what you do, you want to be a better leader, a better actor, a more successful person, then there are these fundamental human skills that no one's talking about.
Yeah. That's immediately made me just the pictures you've painted with your words there. I've almost got this vision of this big elastic band that you're stretching as you are stretching. And one or two things is going to happen. At some point, it's either going to pull you back because it's gone too far, or, as quite often we see, it snaps.
It breaks.
And leaves you in a completely different place.
Love that analogy, yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about them, what it is that you do? I know there's a lot to do with the kind of acting side. I've also seen lots of parenting stuff on the website as well.
Yeah, it's got a bit jumbled because it started off as parenting. I was in the early throes of being a single parent myself, and I had a 2-year-old who was a bit dastardly, and I was finding myself really triggered and wanting to snap back at him, almost behave like the 2-year-old myself. But I knew enough about psychology. I've studied psychology the whole way through. Even as an actor, I was doing studies in psychology. And I knew that I didn't want to parent a certain way. So that triggered something in me that was like, right, I want to learn this. Therefore, other people want to learn this. So how can I support other people to do this, which would allow me to be at home with my son a bit more? So I trained as a parent coach. And in that work, I further... I learned more and more about what I had already discovered through the psychology, which is the first 7 years of life are the most fundamentally impactful on our nervous systems, on our subconscious, and on our outcomes, right? We create this blueprint of who we are and how the world responds to us in that first 7 years. Now, this is just science, right? This isn't coaching. This is just fact. And we've sort of, in the past, we've just accepted that. And we've said, okay, well, then I'm fucked because I had, sorry, if I do swear.
No, it's fine.
I'm fucked because I had trauma when I was 4, or, I have low self-confidence because of my relationship with my dad. We now know that that's just not true, that we have neuroplasticity. And for the rest of our lives, yes, it gets harder the older we get. But for the rest of our lives, we can change all of this. And so on discovering that, I then put 2 and 2 together and realized, well, hold on a second. The reason why I'm doing this work and why I'm so into self-development is because when I was at the top of my game, I was being held back. I was meeting glass ceilings, and I hit up against massive self-sabotage at certain points where I just sort of stopped my progress and, in fact, probably semi-destroyed my career, because of these very deeply laid very self-limiting beliefs that I was holding based on my childhood. And I thought, well, if that was my experience, how many other people in my field are experiencing the same thing? And I now, having worked with parents for 5 years, using and developing these tools to help them get out of their subconscious patterns that are being triggered by their children, I know I can apply this to them. And so what this has allowed me is to step back into a community of people I adore, to actually begin to celebrate what I used to do and what I would like to be doing more of in the future. Now my kid is a little bit older, and talk about my identity as this creative, powerful woman that I have been my whole life. And so it's allowing me to be part of the world that I love and support the people that I love, who I think are very unique, amazing, creative, awesome human beings. So that's really what I'm doing now, is working with actors, but it's not just actors, because I work with all sorts of people who are drawn to what I say. I just talk about that on social media. Yeah. But I work with human beings who are recognizing that they're getting in their own way, who are recognizing that they might have self-sabotage going on, which is quite a technical term, but ultimately realizing that good things begin to happen and then they destroy them for themselves, whether that be in their relationships, whether that be in their work, or that they have imposter syndrome, that they don't feel worthy of the relationships, the job opportunities, the creative opportunities that are coming to them, and that they are feeling like they can't make that stretch. They keep hitting up against the same patterns of being, behavior, or just putting on that glass ceiling so that they're not reaching their potential. And then we really just do the work. And it doesn't take that long to teach people to begin to recognize what's going on and do something different. And that's really the process that I take people through now.
I've seen that on the website, and to some people it might be immediate, other people maybe not so immediate. But when you talked about your self-limiting beliefs, when you kind of started to recognize that, what were they?
Not enoughness. And I would say this is the big one for actors. And what I mean by that is I'm not pretty enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not blonde enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not fat enough. I'm not funny enough. It just goes on and on and on. It's not feeling worthy of the thing that you're saying that you want. I never felt worthy of being on the side of a bus, on the side of a building. I would scrutinize my face. I always thought I was too fat. I had so many detrimental thoughts going around my head. And now, of course, I look back and realize, God, you were lovely and you did amazing things. And I'm proud of myself. Even though I had all that going on, I reached a level of success that most people don't reach. And so I'm really proud of myself. And it was making me very unhappy. This kind of conflict between what I felt worthy of and what I was actually achieving was causing a huge amount of stress and anxiety and unhappiness for myself. So actually, I think I got to a point, and in fact, I know I got to a point where I just couldn't maintain it anymore. And I had to stop for a bit. And so for me, that came about in terms of health stuff. I ended up, I think, manifesting a huge amount of health issues that no one could put their finger on. I eventually got to a point of realizing this is quite metaphysical. This is sort of based in the emotion. And I just think over years and years and years of negative self-talk, of putting stress on my body through how I was asking it to perform, not feeding it properly, not taking care of it in the right way, everything just imploded. And so I then went on a journey for about 1.5 years where I really wasn't on screen, of rebuilding myself. And it was through that process that I was like, right, this is coming from something deep, deep down. This is not coming from something external. And I could recognize how that was then impacting how lucky or unlucky I was in my job, whether I got the opportunities I said I wanted. It was definitely impacting the kinds of people I was drawing into my life and relationships. This self-worth is everything. And I talk about that in terms of identity. Right? Well, who do you believe that you are? Who are you identifying as? And we can change that 100%. But until you become clear of how you identify, then you can't make the choice to shift into something else. And so that's the process I went on. And then through that process, I realized, you know what I want more than anything else is to be a mum. And so I have dedicated myself to that for the last 8 years. And we were just sharing that I'm getting to a place now where I'm like, you know what, I'm ready. I'm really ready. And I really want to be back out there. I did a show last year. I was in this show called Rivals that's about to come out here, and just slowly finding ways to integrate these two halves of my life so that my son can spend more time on set. I get to step into those shoes again, but I'm going to be doing it very differently than I used to.
And where's that going to be on? Which channel, which network?
Sure. I believe it's on Disney Plus, but I don't know when they're airing it, but I'm going to the screening tomorrow, so I'm sure I'll find out more.
Oh, I'll message you and find out how it went.
Yeah.
See, I think it's great. It reminds me of a conversation when I first started this podcast with an ex-cricketer called Chris Lewis, who used to play for England. He was in the World Cup, and he talked about making some really bad decisions. And he talked about when he retired and that kind of point of not knowing himself anymore. He wasn't Chris Lewis, the cricketer. What do I do? And I'm struggling for money, and that's the life and association I now have. And he got arrested for trying to bring drugs back into the country.
Right. Wow.
And he said it was a good while of time in prison until such a point. He said I was staring out into the kind of typical scenery out of the gridded window into the courtyard, going, can I really blame anyone else for me being here other than me?
Yeah.
And it took a long time inside his own head to find that inside there. Particularly poignant that you've just kind of reminded me of that. And it's made me think that the other side sometimes we see, you mentioned that there isn't anything external. Is there any external influence that kind of maybe plants that initial seed or keeps it there whilst you're sabotaging yourself?
Yeah, I mean, the external influence is in childhood. There's two things here. One is, children are innocent and they are a clean slate. And parents aren't taught how to support children. In fact, old parenting paradigms are, in my opinion, very detrimental to the foundations that we lay down in the subconscious minds of our kids in terms of who they believe they are, what they believe relationships are, how they believe they need to show up in relationships with other people. I mean, it impacts their way of attaching to other people, themselves, work that they do, and it deeply impacts their self-worth. So yes, there is, is a child who receives very difficult programming a victim to that? Yes, I would say that they are. It's not something that they wanted or they called in. However, we all experience adversity, and blame in any capacity is very disempowering. The only way you can take control of your future and change it is by taking radical responsibility for who you are right now and accepting the past and making choices about how to move forwards to best support yourself and to change those patterns. It's absolutely possible. So one of the things I work with clients on is this thing called the drama triangle of where are you putting yourself in your life? Are you putting yourself in the victim role? Are you putting yourself in the aggressor or the villain role, or are you putting yourself in the hero role? And who else are you putting in that triangle with you, or what else, right? So a lot of people in the acting industry are putting themselves into victim and the industry into villain or hero, like giving it the power to either save them or destroy them. Well, hold on a second, like that's incredibly disempowering. You will never be happy in this business. You will always be desperate and trying to people please and trying to make sure that you're doing the right things, because otherwise you're going to be left in the dirt. That's not going to be empowering, and ultimately it's not going to make you sexy to somebody else. And we all know that this acting game is very much like dating. You have to be desirable, and if you can't be desirable, then the industry isn't going to take to you. And I don't mean attractive, I mean have something magnetic and interesting that is there and you're cultivating, so that the camera just picks up on it and is drawn in. But it's the same thing with the man or the woman sitting across the table from you. Being a victim is not desirable, and being a victim is not empowering. So how do you get yourself out of it? You have to become your own coach. You have to take radical responsibility and become your own healer, right? No one else is going to do it for you. And that's part of the process that I take people through. I use a 4-step process. And the first step of it is identifying. It's like, let's identify, let's do the inventory of what is working in your life, what is not, and where that's coming from. And ultimately, the only place I'm really interested in is what thoughts and beliefs are you still holding on to? May have been given to you by somebody else, but you're still choosing to hold on to them.
I guess, first of all, I love that, because I think so many people tackle change at any level just by going, that's what we're going after, let's go after it. How the hell are you supposed to even plot a path to it if you don't know where you're starting from? So I think that's really crucial. And the other thing that came to mind as you were speaking there was this, I guess there's a lot of groupthink that starts to come into it, that individuals start to think, well, yeah, I'm the victim, and yeah, maybe Hollywood is the aggressor, or whatever it might be, the industry. And if they all start talking to each other and reinforcing that, it just becomes even more powerful.
Yeah, one of my things is complaining. Stop freaking complaining. Complaining and reinforcing each other's negative belief systems about how hard everything is. Yes, things can be hard. And look, in all vulnerability, I'm going through a breakup right now. It is hard. Like, we have hard experiences in life. They are there as an opportunity, right? Are you going to sit in it or avoid it and just sort of paddle your way through and not learn anything? Or are you going to get into the muck, feel the feelings? I learned something, I'm going to digress, but I learned something this week, which I loved, which is buffalo in the Midwest in America. When a huge storm is coming, they walk into the center of the storm because they know with deep wisdom that that's how to make it pass more quickly, right? You go into the most intense part of it and it passes within moments. Right. You stay in the periphery and that thing is going to take years. And it's the same thing with our emotions. So going into the center of the storm, allowing yourself to fully feel and experience the experience, and then take action about how you're going to move yourself through, how you're going to learn from it, how you're going to grow from it, and how you can do something differently next time. Now that's empowerment. But that means that you're not going to make the same mistakes you did in the next relationship, or you're not going to make the same mistakes when you're next going into an audition. We all make mistakes. We're not perfect, but don't self-flagellate and sit in the shit for the next however long. Walk into the eye of the storm and find out what you can do differently.
I love that. It's this stuff happens in the blink of an eye, doesn't it? That I remember Brené Brown told a story, and very quickly, dropping a cup of coffee, and before it hit the ground, she was blaming her husband for it. And she was like, and he wasn't even in the house.
Yeah. I witnessed 2 brothers the other day, and one of them went down a slide and was bounced off the end and landed on his bum, and he was upset, and he was like, "Arr!" and yelled out the name of his other brother, who is nowhere to be seen. Like, completely different. And I was like, I love that. It's just so programmed to.
It is. Well, you see it everywhere. You just, like, if you watch football and the goal goes in, the goalkeeper, without exception, always just turns around and looks at who they can blame. You're like, it could just have been your fault. It could just have been no one's fault.
Yeah, and look, I know. I mean, look, I do it as well. We all do. I try really hard not to, because ultimately the blame game is very, very disempowering. It takes the power away. So with my clients, it's a struggle sometimes to get them to recognize absolutely everything is their responsibility to change on some level.
And that resonates so much with this kind of corporate world that I work with quite a lot, that the blame cultures that kick in, all the different reasons why that might kick in, that kind of self-preservation, the kind of cyclical redundancies and restructures. So I want to be the one that has made the fewest mistakes, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I think,
how do you support people to not go into victim when they've been made redundant?
Me personally.
Yeah.
So I think it's coming back to recognizing their own worth again.
Yeah.
Because quite often I think we start to, and this is just my experience of speaking to those type of people, that we label ourselves by the job that we've been doing or the company that we've been working at or the relationships that we've had. So I am a trainer in a telecoms company, therefore I now need to try and find a job as a trainer in a telecoms company, and there's none. So my life is over.
Identity.
Mm.
Identifying as this is what I do, this is the box I've got myself in.
So really understanding, I'm a big believer that, in order to manage others, you firstly need to manage yourself and lead yourself. And the big part of that is just, teaching yourself, and this is kind of my process of teaching yourself to be more mindful and just in the moment around these things. What does this all actually mean? Not too much in the past or the future. Where are we? What opportunities might we have? Learning more about yourself. You can't begin to regulate your own beliefs and feelings if you don't understand them.
No, right.
Don't recognize them yourself. And then from that, starting to categorize that and going, well, what gives me energy? What drains my energy? What legacy do I want to leave? And I don't mean by the time you're retired or when you pass away and what people remember. I'm going, if you're going away for 2 weeks from work, what are people thinking and talking to you about you while you're not there?
Love that, yeah.
And what fulfills you ultimately? What that energy and that legacy, are you getting that at the minute?
Yeah.
Are you being fulfilled through it?
Giving people the hope or the belief that they can have more, right? Like, you don't have to settle in life. And I know it's not for everyone that, it's not for everyone. Some people are like, no, I just want security and I just want to, and that's cool. I totally get it. And there is just so many people that I speak to who are unsatisfied, and we get one go around on this planet. I'm a big believer in taking bold action, taking risks, fighting for what you believe, fighting for who you love, what you love, and doing the difficult work so that you get to experience more of that and not settling, and that's what I'm hearing you say is like, but rebuilding that worth so that people can dare to dream and dare to take the small steps that will allow them to stretch into the dream. That is what I'm passionate about. I work with a lot of actors who are just never had representation. My sort of niche is people who, like me, are working and want to take it to the next level, or are hitting up against bigger life issues and are wondering why they're not happy, even though they've got what they say they want. That's kind of my niche. But I also work with people who are right at the beginning of their careers or just pivoted into acting because they realize they want to do this because it lights them up. And like you, it's like, well, how do you take that next baby step? Let's not focus on you being a series regular on a TV show right now. Let's focus on how do you get to feel more confident to call an agent and get them to come and watch a show that you're doing? How do you even get visibility? What class can you go to? What theatre group can you join? And how do you begin to build the neural pathways of belief that you are worthy of that agent signing you? Because if you don't feel worthy of it, I tell you, they're not going to. So I think when I say that the acting industry is such a sort of hothouse for pressure, I think it's because I don't know any other industry where your self-belief has to be so strong. You cannot have an inkling that you're not worthy of the success that you're asking for, because you're going into these rooms with panels of people who are like, are you the solution to our problem? Right. And it's all about your body, your face, your ability to communicate, your ability to show up in the moment. There is no cello to hide behind, or whiteboard or presentation that you can kind of defer it to. It is just all you. So there's no lying, especially on camera where they're picking up everything in your eyes. So I talk a lot about the architecture of the brain, of how do you support, in two ways. When you go in and do an audition, you have to see yourself, especially on camera, but you have to be in the world that your character is looking at. You cannot be looking at the camera, seeing the camera behind your friend's shoulder. That's, you can't be seeing that. You've got to be seeing this whole infrastructure for that to fully live on your face, to fully live your lives, but also the architecture of your mind in terms of how do you prepare it more long-term, more preventatively maybe, so that you can withhold the pressure that you are going to be under in those moments with complete authenticity of, I've got this, and I know who I am, and I know how strong and resilient and capable and worthy of this moment I am.
That authenticity there, I think that's key, because what I've heard from you there is that I would imagine, well, you started off earlier on talking about this fake it till you make it mentality, and now we're kind of going, there's no other industry probably requires such self-belief, and there are those people who probably fake it, that self-belief, to such a degree that when it really gets tough, they're not authentically self-believing. So that's when they get found out, and
I think that is what
starts.
happened to me. I think that's what happened to me. I think I was very good at faking it. And I think so much so that it was almost my identity, right? Like I grew up in a family of 7 children, all boys but me, and I was the youngest. There was no emphasis on emotion in our house. And I'm a very emotional being. I'm a hypersensitive, very emotional woman that was not taught that this is a superpower. Actually, this is part of why I'm good at what I do. But instead, I was taught to be tough. And I was taught that this soft interior is not safe. And, and I was also growing up in the ladette culture of the 90s, where like Zoe Ball and that whole gang were like the chicks with the low slung pants and Spice Girls and all of that. So it was like, how do you show up and be strong and drink down a pint in the same time a man can? So there was this bravado that I developed, and it was like my armor. And actually, for a long time, it was the thing that got me the job, right? Because on a surface level, I was very good at being ballsy and kind of sexy, and because it was the bravado I was playing in my life. But you get to a certain point where you want to have good relationships, authentic relationships. You want to go deeper into the craft, right? You want more. You want more connection, and you can't do it from that place. And this was the glass ceiling that I think I hit, where I was like, shit, I have been quite phony this whole time. It served me. This protection mechanism has served me to a certain extent, but it's not serving me anymore. It's making me unwell and lonely and sad. And so that whole exterior had to crumble. And in the crumbling of that exterior, it was very scary. And I don't want people to have to go through that. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be gradual and it can be gentle. And it can happen at the same time as enjoying your success. It doesn't have to sort of destroy everything. But this is the imposter syndrome I sort of talk about, of you can't be working from a place of self-protection and bravado and show up at a table read and feel like you really deserve to be there, because there's such separation between what the external is and what the internal is. And authenticity for me is when you narrow down the difference between what you're projecting and who you ultimately know you are deep down inside.
Yeah.
Right. And for acting, I think for longevity in this business, you need to be in that authentic space. And the other thing is, I think you can see it. I look back at some of my work, I'm like, I don't believe that. It was fun and it was sexy and it was cool for television, but I was like, I don't really believe that. And I can see it in other actors too. You can see insecurity, and I'm trying to help people sort of find more authenticity in their emotional performances, but also just for themselves, which will impact their work massively and will mean that they get to have the relationships and lives and other things that they want.
You brought it nicely to that imposter syndrome again, because I find that there's this divide in corporate world as well, that people will look at these leaders, middle leaders, senior leaders, and how confident they are and amazing they are, and or how terrible they are and how much they hate them. But it always seems to be the same story. They're really confident. How do they do that? And how can they get away with that? and I coach quite a lot of them as well. And I was going to say it's becoming more and more common to hear the words, but I'm not sure it's just always been common. This imposter syndrome, when they get the opportunity, for them, it's almost the buzzword they've heard and they've latched to it and gone, that's what it is, without really thinking about what it is. So from your experience, what's going on to bring someone to that realization?
Well, I think that's a very good point. And actually, even just in terms of marketing for what I do, it's a very good point. Is you want people, like, the term doesn't actually mean anything. What means something is the feelings that experience brings up in you. And the feeling of imposter syndrome is panic. It's fear, right? It's I don't deserve to be here and I'm going to be caught out. I'm going to be exposed. And that's terrifying. So look, we're all going to be nervous when we're stretching ourselves to do something new. But when the thoughts that are coming with that are so detrimental that it impacts your ability to perform because of the fear that comes out of the thinking, then you're going to self-sabotage in that moment, right? You're going to come up with some reason why it's not the right thing. You're going to not do the work. You're going to hit up into procrastination, and you're not going to do the work to be prepared so that the opportunity actually goes well. You're going to have a thought in the middle of it that what the fuck, like, they see through me, and you're going to forget what you're meant to be doing. That's the kind of experience that comes out of imposter syndrome. Or it goes really well, but you go home feeling empty and ashamed, and you feel awful, and you're not quite sure why. You're like, I just did something I really wanted to do. And this was an experience I had all the time. Just did something I really wanted to do. I achieved it, but I can't believe that I was good enough, even though other people are telling me that I am. And I feel empty and sad and gutted, actually. That, I would say, is the physical, sensational experience of imposter syndrome.
And people will be listening to this now, looking at one of those two passive, not both, going, yep, that's it. That's what I feel. Different experiences at different levels. So what's your process? How do you engage with those people that kind of come? I think initially I would kind of go, let's start from the start. No one's injected you with something called imposter syndrome. It's not like a thing. So what's coming into it?
But you will have deep down beliefs in place that are causing the imposter syndrome. And the deep down beliefs in place almost always go back to childhood in some capacity. So I use a process called EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique, which is a modern psychology meets Chinese medicine. We use the meridian system in the body the same way that in Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine does. But we also use this understanding in modern psychology. We talk about the body holds the score, that we hold sensations in the body based on past experiences that have not been fully processed. When we go into the sensations held in the body that are connected to an experience, whether that experience be in the present moment right now, or whether you're going into the memory of an experience that happened last week, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we hold those experiences in the body. And in that, there is a lot of information that will pop up from the subconscious, right? The subconscious is holding. We might first feel this sensation, be like, I have no idea what that's about. But we can use EFT to go deeper into that experience and find information of, like, where is this? Where is the thought in my head that I don't deserve to be in that room? Or where is the shame that I'm feeling when I go home and lie in bed? I'm like, fuck, I don't deserve this. Where is that feeling in the body? And how does that connect to an experience I don't think I remember, but your body will, in the past? And once you can go back there, then you can actually go to the root of where that belief was founded. And then you can soothe it. Then you can change the neural pathways. So it happens both on a very physical level, but then we try and connect it into, okay, well, how's that showing up in our lives today? So we go in and we clear it out. And it's this thing about walking into the eye of the storm again. It's about that experience you had. Maybe you were 12 years old and you were in a school play and it didn't go well. And suddenly you made a belief that you're rubbish at everything and you don't deserve these opportunities, right? that memory will come up quite easily for most people.
Mm-hmm.
You go in and you can support that 12-year-old girl through a bunch of hypnosis. It's not hypnosis, but it's a process of going back in and actually just being with and soothing that experience that wasn't taken care of properly at the time. So you meet the need of that part of you. And through that, you find more ease. You go into the heart of the storm of that experience, and the emotion just pops and dissolves and begins to break up, right? So then you start breaking the bond between the past and what's happening in your present. And then I take people through the next phase, which is to align with what you really do want. How do you create standards in your life that you know you are taking the steps towards the experiences you truly want, so that you can create boundaries, you can say no to things that aren't supporting you, you can say yes to the things that are supporting you, be more mindful about the life that you're creating for yourself, what you're worth, holding yourself up to that worth, right? Because one of the biggest issues I see is we have self-abandon all the time. And if we are not holding up our own standards, no one else is going to. And this is probably more relevant in relationships, but it's definitely relevant in work too. And then we go through neurally reprogramming. So that's really more of the future focused stuff of really imagining yourself and the experiences that you want to be in, practicing, rehearsing, because we know that the only way to change a belief is through hypnosis or repetition. And so I sort of do a combination of the two, where you begin to create new neural pathways that create the identity of the person that you know deserves all of those amazing things: the house, the relationship, the job. How does it feel to be in that person's body? How do they move? How do they speak? How does it literally feel to be in that experience, allowing that emotion and that imagination, that thought to come together, and just hold that in your body as a repetition, as a practice, which slowly creates a somatic and in the body experience that you resonate with on a more day-to-day level, therefore making different micro choices in every moment. Right, that's where the change sits.
Love that. I love that. What was whirring in my mind then, years ago, I went to see an NLP coach. And that actually then set me on a path, and I did NLP training, got the certificate, all that sort of stuff, because of the change it made. And for me, it was something simple, as simple as I was chatting to him one day. He worked in the office upstairs where my wife worked, and just having a chat with him. I said, I've got this terrible fear of spiders, you know. But, oh, I can help you with that. I'm like, nah, I've tried to help myself, mate. It's never going to work. And it's exactly what you were just talking about. And it was NLP, neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis. And you're quite right, you know, those visions of, I don't know, Paul McKenna with a watch swinging in front of your face isn't what it is. It's just kind of relaxation.
Paul McKenna is a genius. Yeah.
And he talks a lot about NLP actually, and some of his audiobooks.
He uses it
fantastic.
A lot. Yeah.
But yeah, just taking you back into a moment where, and I think, you know, the words you've used there are crucial. Well, the word, how you feel, how you felt in that moment, and then reprogramming that. I remember it vividly that in this moment, it was a bit of a tangent. You talk about tangents. Here's one for you. Me and my wife staring at a spider in the bathroom, and we must have been staring at it for what felt about 3 years, but probably about 10 minutes. And neither of us had moved because neither of us would get it. No chance. And neither of us could leave because where would it go?
Yeah, right.
What are we going to do? Frozen forever. And so we played that back in my mind over and over again. And you'll know the techniques of things like flushing the colour from it, bringing the colour, finding the emotions, living it, rewinding it, playing it forward, slow motion, fast forward, all that sort of stuff. Until we got to the end of the process is right, one final time, we're going to play it through all of it and in fast forward. And as he did that, and encouraged me to start the process, he played that running theme music from the Benny Hill shows. Remember that?
Yeah.
And I just burst out laughing, like, because my eyes were closed. Didn't expect that for a minute. And it just completely, in that moment, reprogrammed that subconscious to kind of go, well, this is just ridiculous. This is a comedy. This isn't a tragedy, us staring at the spider. This is purely comedic.
Pathways. It's just a different connection.
Hmm.
It sounds so complicated, and in reality, it's not. Our brains are looking to make connections all the time so that it can be more efficient. It's for our best benefit. And so, yeah, we can reprogram this stuff. It's not undoable. And actually, sometimes the most fun ones are the phobia ones, because it is so immediate. I had one friend actually who came to me and she's like, I can't be in a car. I really want to learn to drive, but I don't like even being in a car. I certainly don't want to be behind the wheel. And after one session, she was able to go and have her first lesson,
Right.
and now is driving everywhere. But it's just disconnecting whatever belief that you've created that has this emotional resonance to it, and connecting it with something else. Totally
Definitely. That was awesome. And now I'm the one who gets the spiders. And interestingly, you talked about that kind of influence of parents on the children. My daughter, who's 18, she's terrified of spiders.
Right.
My son, who's 13, who was born after I'd gone through that, he don't mind them.
Yeah. Were your parents terrified of spiders?
I don't really remember my dad whether he was or he wasn't, but my mum, yeah.
Yeah, there's something that you witnessed. Look, it's a lot of pressure on parents too. That's the other thing. I pivoted away from parent coaching a bit because, I still do work with some, but partly because I found it so difficult to market it without creating shame. You're putting so much weight on the parent, and it's like, look, just enough, doing just enough is enough. Like, building your awareness around this is enough, because we're never going to be perfect and we're never going to get it just right. And if we did, our kids would not be prepared for the real world. Because 100%. Adversity is part of the human experience. We don't get out of this alive. We're going to lose people along the way. Resilience is being able to deal with the difficult things and bounce back. Yeah. So just, putting it out there to the parents who might be listening, like, look, we have, awareness and doing our best around this stuff of how we support our kids in what they believe is important. And, we're going to mess it up. Of course we are.
Exactly. And again, I think that's true. Back into this corporate world a second, that, we do mess it up. And there's a bit of that. You mentioned earlier on about how lonely that the acting world can be. And I think it's the same for leaders, that, they feel quite often, or this is how I perceive it sometimes, is that, I can't talk to my team that I'm struggling, because that's a position of weakness. I can't show that. And I quite often can't tell the people above me that I'm struggling, because equally that's a position of weakness. Where might that position me in the politics of the organization? How will that change people's views for me? I'm going to get measured at the end of the year with a score, and that might then form part of that assessment. So I don't do that. Can't talk to my peers about it. So there's a definite, well, who do I tell? And I think the work that you do, that I do, that coaches do in that sort of sphere, the first point is that, how do you actually get them talking about those feelings before we kind of delve in and try and address or reprogram? How do we get them talking about them?
Yeah, do you know what? You've just pulled up a few things in my mind. One is, I'm hearing a very masculine problem of, where do men go to talk about their feelings? And it's something I'm quite passionate about. One, because in the relationship I was just in, it was a conversation we had a lot, where there had been some difficult experiences for him in the past. And, how do you support a man? Because I don't think it's natural for you guys to go and chat about the difficulties. And many men don't even think that is the way that men process. It's not even helpful. For women, I think we do unload And we naturally do that with our friends and our peers. And there isn't actually shame when you pick the right people to talk about these things with. There is a very safe place to go. And emotion is our language. Like, it's not masculine language typically, it is the feminine. And so we are so much better equipped to do that. So I'm also raising a son, and that matters to me a lot. I see, when you look at suicide rates, young white men actually are right up there. They're the highest suicide rates. So this is something I really care about, but I don't coach men, and I don't because I don't understand it well enough yet. But I love that you're there doing it, and that there are lots of other men doing it. And I just really call out to the men listening that I agree that it's not always about talk therapy. That might not be the way that things shift for men, but that's why I love things like NLP, EFT, hypnosis, EMDR for real trauma. These are ways that you can process the difficult stuff without having to talk, if that doesn't feel available to you. I also have a deep question of like, what is it that stops men from talking? Is it because society has said that that's not strong? Or is it because your brains actually work differently? And it's research that I'm still looking at and I don't know the answer to. But in terms of the people that I coach, who are predominantly women, I have worked with men and I love working with men. The first thing that I find is important is, well, firstly, building trust. My job is to almost reparent these people. It's to be the parent, the sort of completely benevolent, accepting, skilled parent who they may or may not have had, right? Like, I have got the skills to let your subconscious know that I'm completely listening to you, that you are completely seen, heard, and appreciated in this space, which in itself creates safety, which you would be amazed in itself what that safety does in terms of allowing people to open up. The next thing is actually how to bring people back into their bodies, because so much of the time we are in our minds, we're in our thoughts, we're ruminating, we're going round and round in circles about something and trying to logically find the way through, which I understand is more the language of men. And again, I'm not in complete understanding of how to do this in a masculine way. But for women, I see that when we are in our mind too much and not in our bodies, then we're going around in circles and we're often not feeling very empowered. So I bring the women back into their bodies and we start just listening to what the body is telling them. And I use EFT to do that. And there's one part of the EFT process where you say, even though I'm feeling X, Y, and Z in my body, I love and accept myself completely just the way I am. And usually that's the thing that gets the emotion to flow, is that love and acceptance that they have been craving. Sometimes people can't even say it. It's too hard for them to even offer that to themselves. And so then we know where our jumping off point is. But I find the more I can take them into the body, the more available the emotion becomes. Now, the challenge is there are some people who literally cannot do that. There are some people who from here down, they just feel nothing. And that's a slightly longer process. And I begin to just help them start feeling, well, what does hunger feel like in your body? How do you know you're hungry, right? How do you know you need the loo? What are the physical sensations of that? And then slowly just building more safety in coming back into the body. And the reason why they cut that off is because there's so much in there that they're terrified, that, subconsciously terrified that if they open the lid on that, they're never going to be able to cope. But I teach them the tools to do it for themselves, so that there's never a moment that they can't cope with. Does that answer your question?
Definitely does, yeah. And you know what? There's a bit of a running joke at the minute that my wife and I love watching Married at First Sight. And I'm proud I'm owning it. I love it. But one of the things I love about it is there's the one-to-one plus the group dynamics behind it. And I'm watching, we're just finishing the Australian latest series at the minute, and there's this guy in it called Timothy, exactly what you've just been talking about. And they paired him with this amazing woman called Lucinda, who is the polar opposite, just the energy of the world going through her, and just amazing. And for want of a better phrase, she's almost counseled him through the process. And he has taken almost the entire experiment to really be able to open up his feelings and get inside himself a little bit. Exactly what you've said there. It's like, that's all down there. That's all been pushed away. I've lost everything that's ever been near me. But interestingly, I think that what then happened is that there was a massive relapse moment, that he'd let the floodgates open, embraced the floodgates, and then gone, hang on, I'm not comfortable with this. I need to go back to what I know and shut it again. This is weird.
Yeah. And then did he come back out through the other end?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, look, we have a homeostasis that, familiarity to the nervous system is safer than anything else. Even if the situation that we're in is shit, the familiarity is safer than what we, better the devil you know. This is where it comes from. So the nervous system will do everything it can to keep you exactly where you are. And so sometimes change is going to feel unsafe. That's why we develop tools to hold yourself through the fear, right? But if you know what direction you want to grow in, then it's worth it. But it's, in somatic experience, they talk about titration. Somatic experience is an in the body practice and therapy that really uses the body in this way. And we talk about titration in the nervous system work, which is just drip by drip by drip. The nervous system is such a shy and terrified creature that you say boo to it, it's going to withdraw back into its shell. You're teasing out the kitten that's just come home from the shelter, right? Like, you move too fast, this thing's going to disappear. And it's just really slowly eking it out, creating the safety, loving this thing, being the safe space for this nervous system that you're asking to change.
Yeah.
And so that's what, I love that. I would love to watch that. And I find it inspiring because I do think there are a lot of men like that.
It's interesting. He'd lost all his family had passed away, and I think he was about 50 years old. Speaking to him in past tense because the season's nearly finished, but he's about 50 years old, and he's just amazing. And that relationship, and I'd recommend you watch it. I learn. And I've got no problems in saying it. I learn so much about people and the coaching process still by watching things like that, because the kind of the experts, I think, are really good as well, because they are coaches in that zone. And it's interesting that a few years back, so I've been running my own business for nearly 4 years. Someone got in touch with me and said, "You realise that all your testimonials on your website are from women, don't you?" And I didn't know. It was just kind of passively, I work, I get feedback, I share it, and so on. And I've done a lot of reflection on that in now work as a supervisor as well, to kind of go, what's going on there? One of the patterns I've found is that women have been more likely to approach me directly for support that they need. The men that I've now worked with have mostly come from a position of where a woman has reached out with them for my support, or for them even, which is interesting.
That's interesting. I also wonder if talking about it afterwards is more available to women than to men, that there's a sort of shame that they needed help at all. So they don't really want to publicize that. But I think that's very, very relevant. And it's something that's very personal to me, because there are people I love very much, men I love in my life, who I see they think I'm absolutely nuts doing this work. They won't get the help that I think would really serve them. And even the word help feels patronizing to them. I've hit up against it, that even mentioning, like, I'd like to help you, or there is help out there, they're like, how dare you just that I need help.
And framing what that help is, sometimes it's a case of, and I've got a few people like this who they might just send me a WhatsApp to say something's going on, and then by the time they've got to the end of the WhatsApp and sent it, that's shared, and they go, oh, it's all right now I've got it out of the system. How do we create that space for people just to release it?
Yeah.
And that might lead elsewhere. But sometimes that's all people want to do. You know, I've loved this conversation.
I think, how do they release it without starting with a conversation? And when conversation, I just see so much protection around this thing that we're logical, we're not emotional. I don't, talking doesn't help. I don't know. This is really something that I want to learn more about, for sure.
Yeah. Some cars, you can put your foot down, it'll get to 100 miles an hour in no time. Others are going to need a downhill, a good following wind, and maybe a few people pushing as well.
Yeah,
we're all different.
Of the people who know that they, who are problem and solution aware. In marketing, we talk about problem aware, solution aware. Who are you talking to? Do they know what the problem is? Do they even know they've got a problem? How do you talk to them? I don't just want to serve the people who know that there's a problem and that there's a solution and know that I'm the solution. I want to help people who are lost, and I don't know why I'm lost. So it's about how to talk to those people of like, do you feel this way? Like, do you feel hopeless? Do you feel alone, isolated, trapped? Then there's a way through, right? And I think there's more work for me to do on how to speak to those people. Yeah.
And potentially, from what you said before, helping people understand what that feeling actually is, because they might feel all that, but they don't know that's what that is.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Oh, they don't know what it looks like in behaviour. Yeah. Sure.
You know what? I've really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for it. I've learned so much from you again today, which is awesome. I do for my guests. And I think my listeners will love every message in there as well. Such an important message and role that you're playing in it. We've got to the part of the show where I like to kind of look back now and go, right, we've been talking about lots there. What kind of springs to mind as a natural title for the episode based on what we've been chatting about? Anything jump into your mind?
Well, certainly something around the subconscious, but then I don't want it to be too technical. So I would imagine, how are your thoughts preventing you? How are your thoughts holding you back? Something like that.
How are your thoughts holding you back?
Yeah, something like that. What do you think?
Well, I love kind of just making a note now and again when something jumps out at me. Yeah. And I loved earlier on when you said, and this was near the start, just stop freaking complaining.
There you go. Crack on with that. You know what? This is my problem with the marketing. Is like I'm trying to do it all correct and right, and I'm like, no, so much better. Is that?
I loved it. It was like, that's everything pouring out in one sentence. Stop freaking complaining. Get on with it. Do this.
Yeah,
love that.
Stop complaining.
If anyone's been inspired to follow you, get in touch with you, work with you, see more of what you do, what's the best way for them to follow you, Anastasia?
Either on Instagram, I'm the Anastasia Griffith on Instagram. I'm sure there'll be sort of episode notes here that you can click on that. Or the website is anastasiagriffithcoaching.com. It's just changed, but that's what it is.
Awesome. That's exactly what I'll do. I'll put notes, links to that in the show notes so people can click on those directly and get in touch with you. That's awesome. And please, that's how I've got in touch with Anastasia, by following her on Instagram. Well worth a follow. So thank you very much for that today. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of this episode of the Leadership Untitled podcast, which is entitled Stop Freaking Complaining. And if you've listened to the episode all the way through, you'll know exactly why we've called it that. My thanks again go out to Anastasia for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure and a great conversation, and I'm sure of value to many people out there listening. And also my thanks to you for listening. Please make sure you subscribe and follow and like the episodes in the series so you don't miss out on future episodes, and feel free to go and explore the back catalogue. Thanks a lot, and hopefully see you again soon. Bye now.